Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to some new members of our Patreon family: Hillary, Dennis, and Meredith. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. If you're interested in supporting Boring Books for Bedtime and finding out more about the perks available to subscribers, including exclusive episodes and collections found nowhere else, you'll find a link to Patreon in the show description. You'll also find a link to buymeacoffee.com, where you can support us with a one-time tip, no subscription required. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, let's relax with the conclusion of a rather famous work that combines mathematics with social commentary. Flatland, a romance of many dimensions, by A. Square, better known as Edwin A. Abbott, in a second and revised edition published in 1884. Let's pick up right where we left off at section 19. Let's begin. Section 19. How, though the sphere showed me other mysteries of Spaceland, I still desired more, and what came of it. When I saw my poor brother led away to imprisonment, I attempted to leap down into the council chamber, desiring to intercede on his behalf, or at least bid him farewell. But I found that I had no motion of my own. I absolutely depended on the volition of my guide, who said in gloomy tones, "Heed not thy brother. Haply thou shalt have ample time hereafter to condole with him. Follow me." Once more we ascended into space. "Hitherto," said the sphere, "I have shown you naught save plane figures and their interiors. Now I must introduce you to solids and reveal to you the plan upon which they are constructed. Behold this multitude of movable square cards. See, I put one on another, not as you supposed, northward of the other, but on the other. Now a second, now a third. See, I am building up a solid by a multitude of squares parallel to one another. Now the solid is complete, being as high as it is long and broad, and we call it a cube." "Pardon me, my lord," replied I, "but to my eye the appearance is as of an irregular figure whose inside is laid open to the view. In other words, methinks I see no solid, but a plane, such as we infer in Flatland, only of an irregularity which betokens some monstrous criminal, so that the very sight of it is painful to my eyes." "True," said the sphere, "it appears to you a plane, because you are not accustomed to light and shade and perspective, just as in Flatland a hexagon would appear a straight line to one who has not the art of sight recognition. but in reality it is a solid, as you shall learn by the sense of feeling. He then introduced me to the cube, and I found that this marvelous being was indeed no plane, but a solid, and that he was endowed with 6 plane sides and 8 terminal points, called solid angles. And I remembered the saying of the sphere that just such a creature as this would be formed by a square moving in space, parallel to himself. And I rejoiced to think that so insignificant a creature as I could in some sense be called the progenitor of so illustrious an offspring. But still I could not fully understand the meaning of what my teacher had told me concerning light and shade and perspective, and I did not hesitate to put my difficulties before him. Were I to give the sphere's explanation of these matters, succinct and clear though it was, it would be tedious to an inhabitant of space who knows these things already. Suffice it that by his lucid statements, and by changing the position of objects and lights, and by allowing me to feel the several objects and even his own sacred person, he at last made all things clear to me, so that I could now readily distinguish between a circle and a sphere, a plane figure and a solid. This was the climax, the paradise of my strange eventful history. Henceforth I have to relate the story of my miserable fall, most miserable, yet surely most undeserved. For why should the thirst for knowledge be aroused only to be disappointed and punished? My volition shrinks from the painful task of recalling my humiliation, yet like a second Prometheus, I will endure this and worse, if by any means I may arouse in the interiors of plain and solid humanity a spirit of rebellion against the conceit which would limit our dimensions to 2 or 3, or any number short of infinity. Away then with all personal considerations. Let me continue to the end as I began, without further digressions or anticipations, pursuing the plain path of dispassionate history. The exact facts, the exact words, and they are burnt in upon my brain, shall be set down without alteration of an iota, and let my readers judge between me and destiny. The sphere would willingly have continued his lessons by indoctrinating me in the conformation of all regular solids, cylinders, cones, pyramids, pentahedrons, hexahedrons, dodecahedrons, and spheres, but I ventured to interrupt him. Not that I was wearied of knowledge. On the contrary, I thirsted for yet deeper and fuller draughts than he was offering to me. "Pardon me," said I, "O thou whom I must no longer address as the perfection of all beauty, but let me beg thee to vouchsafe thy servant a sight of thine interior." Sphere. My what? I, thine interior, thy stomach, thy intestines. Sphere. Whence this ill-timed impertinent request? And what mean you by saying that I am no longer the perfection of all beauty? I, my lord, your own wisdom has taught me to aspire to one even more great, more beautiful, and more closely approximate to perfection than yourself. As you yourself, superior to all Flatland forms, combine many circles in one, so doubtless there is one above you, who combines many spheres in one supreme existence, surpassing even the solids of Spaceland. And even as we, who are now in space, look down on Flatland and see the insides of all things. So of a certainty there is yet above us some higher, purer region, whither thou dost surely purpose to lead me. O thou whom I shall always call, everywhere and in all dimensions, my priest, philosopher, and friend, some yet more spacious space, some more dimensionable dimensionality, from the vantage ground of which we shall look down together upon the revealed insides of solid things, and where thine own intestines, and those of thy kindred spheres, will lie exposed to the view of the poor wandering exile from Flatland, to whom so much has already been vouchsafed. Sphere. Pooh, stuff, enough of this trifling. The time is short, and much remains to be done before you are fit to proclaim the gospel of 3 dimensions to your blind, benighted countrymen in Flatland. Nay, gracious teacher, deny me not what I know it is in thy power to perform. Grant me but one glimpse of thine interior, and I am satisfied forever, remaining henceforth thy docile pupil, thy unemancipable slave, ready to receive all thy teachings, and to feed upon the words that fall from thy lips. Sphere. Well then, to content and silence you, let me say at once, I would show you what you wish if I could, but I cannot. Would you have me turn my stomach inside out to oblige you? Aye, but my lord has shown me the intestines of all my countrymen in the land of 2 dimensions, by taking me with him into the land of 3. What therefore more easy than now to take his servant on a second journey into the blessed region of the 4th dimension, where I shall look down with him once more upon this land of 3 dimensions, and see the inside of every 3-dimensioned house, the secrets of the solid earth, the treasures of the mines in Spaceland, and the intestines of every solid living creature, even of the noble and adorable spheres. Sphere. But where is this land of 4 dimensions? I know not, but doubtless my teacher knows. Sphere. Not I. There is no such land. The very idea of it is utterly inconceivable. I. Not inconceivable, my lord, to me, and therefore still less inconceivable to my master. Nay, I despair not that even here in this region of 3 dimensions, your lordship's art may make the 4th dimension visible to me, just as in the land of 2 dimensions, my teacher's skill would fain have opened the eyes of his blind servant to the invisible presence of a 3rd dimension, though I saw it not. Let me recall the past. Was I not taught below that when I saw a line and inferred a plane, I in reality saw a 3rd unrecognized dimension, not the same as brightness, called height? And does it not now follow that in this region, when I see a plane and infer a solid, I really see a 4th unrecognized dimension, not the same as color, but existent, though infinitesimal and incapable of measurement? And besides this, there is the argument from analogy of figures. Sphere. Analogy. Nonsense, what analogy? Aye, your lordship tempts his servant to see whether he remembers the revelations imparted to him. Trifle not with me, my lord. I crave, I thirst for more knowledge. Doubtless we cannot see that other higher spaceland now, because we have no eye in our stomachs. But just as there was the realm of Flatland, though the poor puny Lineland monarch could neither turn to left nor right to discern it, and just as there was close at hand and touching my frame the land of 3 dimensions, though I, blind, senseless wretch, had no power to touch it, no eye in my interior to discern it, so of a surety there is a 4th dimension, which my Lord perceives with the inner eye of thought, and that it must exist, my Lord himself has taught me. Or can he have forgotten what he himself imparted to his servant? In 1 dimension, did not a moving point produce a line with 2 terminal points? In 2 dimensions, did not a moving line produce a square with 4 terminal points? In 3 dimensions, did not a moving square produce, did not this eye of mine behold it, that blessed being a cube with 8 terminal points? And in 4 dimensions, shall not a moving cube, alas for analogy, and alas for the progress of truth, if it be not so, shall not, I say, the motion of a divine cube result in a still more divine organization with 16 terminal points? Behold the infallible confirmation of the series 2, 4, 8, 16. Is not this a geometrical progression? Is not this, if I might quote my Lord's own words, strictly according to analogy? Again, was I not taught by my Lord that as in a line there are 2 bounding points, and in a square there are 4 bounding lines, so in a cube there must be 6 bounding squares? Behold once more the confirming series 2, 4, 6. Is not this an arithmetical progression? And consequently, does it not of necessity follow that the more divine offspring of the divine cube in the land of 4 dimensions must have 8 bounding cubes? And is not this also, as my Lord has taught me to believe, strictly according to analogy? O my Lord, behold! I cast myself in faith upon conjecture, not knowing the facts, and I appeal to your Lordship to confirm or deny my logical anticipations. If I am wrong, I yield, and will no longer demand a 4th dimension. But if I am right, my Lord will listen to reason. I ask, therefore, is it or is it not the fact that ere now your countrymen also have witnessed the descent of beings of a higher order than their own, entering closed rooms, even as your Lordship entered mine, without the opening of doors or windows, and appearing and vanishing at will? On the reply to this question, I am ready to stake everything. Deny it, and I am henceforth silent. Only vouchsafe an answer. Sphere, after a pause, it is reported so, but men are divided in opinion as to the facts, and even granting the facts, they explain them in different ways, and in any case, however great may be the number of different explanations, no one has adopted or suggested the theory of a 4th dimension. Therefore, pray have done with this trifling, and let us return to business. I was certain of it. I was certain that my anticipations would be fulfilled. And now have patience with me, and answer me yet one more question, best of teachers. Those who have thus appeared, no one knows whence, and have returned, no one knows whither. Have they also contracted their sections, and vanished somehow into that more spacious space, whither I now entreat you to conduct me? Sphere, moodily. They have vanished, certainly, if they ever appeared, but most people say that these visions arose from the thought, you will not understand me, from the brain, from the perturbed angularity of the seer. Ay, say they so? Oh, believe them not. Or if it indeed be so, that this other space is really Thoughtland, then take me to that blessed region where I, in thought, shall see the insides of all solid things. There before my ravished eye a cube, moving in some altogether new direction, but strictly according to analogy, so as to make every particle of his interior pass through a new kind of space, with a wake of its own, shall create a still more perfect perfection than himself, with 16 terminal extra solid angles, and 8 solid cubes for his perimeter. And once there, shall we stay our upward course. In that blessed region of 4 dimensions, shall we linger on the threshold of the 5th, and not enter therein? Ah, no. Let us rather resolve that our ambition shall soar with our corporeal ascent, than yielding to our intellectual onset, the gates of the 6th dimension shall fly open, after that a 7th, and then an 8th. How long I should have continued I know not. In vain did the sphere, in his voice of thunder, reiterate his command of silence, and threaten me with the direst penalties if I persisted. Nothing could stem the flood of my ecstatic aspirations. Perhaps I was to blame, but indeed I was intoxicated with the recent draughts of truth to which he himself had introduced me. However, the end was not long in coming. My words were cut short by a crash outside, and a simultaneous crash inside me, which impelled me through space with a velocity that precluded speech. Down, 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 I was rapidly descending, and I knew that return to Flatland was my doom. One glimpse, one last and never to be forgotten glimpse I had of that dull, level wilderness, which was now to become my universe again, spread out before my eye. Then a darkness, then a final, all-consummating thunder peal, and when I came to myself, I was once more a common creeping square, in my study at home, listening to the peace cry of my approaching wife. Section 20. How the sphere encouraged me in a vision. Although I had less than a minute for reflection, I felt by a kind of instinct that I must conceal my experiences from my wife. Not that I apprehended at the moment any danger from her divulging my secret, but I knew that to any woman in Flatland, the narrative of my adventures must needs be unintelligible, so I endeavored to reassure her by some story invented for the occasion, that I had accidentally fallen through the trap door of the cellar and had there lain stunned. The southward attraction in our country is so slight that even to a woman My tale necessarily appeared extraordinary and well nigh incredible. But my wife, whose good sense far exceeds that of the average of her sex, and who perceived that I was unusually excited, did not argue with me on the subject, but insisted that I was ill and required repose. I was glad of an excuse for retiring to my chamber to think quietly over what had happened. When I was at last by myself, a drowsy sensation fell on me, but before my eyes closed, I endeavored to reproduce the third dimension, and especially the process by which a cube is constructed through the motion of a square. It was not so clear as I could have wished, but I remembered that it must be upward and yet not northward, and I determined steadfastly to retain these words as the clue which, if firmly grasped, could not fail to guide me to the solution. So mechanically repeating, like a charm, the words upward yet not northward, I fell into a sound, refreshing sleep. During my slumber, I had a dream. I thought I was once more by the side of the sphere, whose lustrous hue betokened that he had exchanged his wrath against me for perfect placability. We were moving together towards a bright but infinitesimally small point to which my master directed my attention. As we approached, methought there issued from it a slight humming noise, as from one of your Spaceland blue bottles, only less resonant by far. So slight indeed that even in the perfect stillness of the vacuum through which we soared, the sound reached not our ears till we checked our flight at a distance from it of something under 20 human diagonals. "Look yonder," said my guide. "In Flatland thou hast lived. Of Lineland thou hast received a vision. Thou hast soared with me to the heights of Spaceland. Now, in order to complete the range of thy experience, I conduct thee downward to the lowest depth of existence, even to the realm of Pointland, the abyss of no dimensions. Behold yon miserable creature. That point is a being like ourselves, but confined to the non-dimensional gulf. He is himself his own world, his own universe. Of any other than himself he can form no conception. He knows not length, nor breadth, nor height, for he has had no experience of them. He has no cognizance even of the number 2, nor has he thought of plurality, for he is himself his one and all, being really nothing. Yet mark his perfect self-contentment, and hence learn this lesson, that to be self-contented is to be vile and ignorant, and that to aspire is better than to be blindly and impotently happy. Now listen." He ceased, and there arose from the little buzzing creature a tiny, low, monotonous, but distinct tinkling, as from one of your Spaceland phonographs, from which I caught these words: "Infinite beatitude of existence. It is, and there is none else beside it." "What," said I, "does the puny creature mean by it?" "He means himself," said the sphere. "Have you not noticed before now that babies and babyish people who cannot distinguish themselves from the world speak of themselves in the third person? But hush! It fills all space," continued the little soliloquizing creature. and what it fills it is, what it thinks that it utters, and what it utters that it hears, and it itself is thinker, utterer, hearer, thought, word, audition. It is the one, and yet the all in all. Ah, the happiness! Ah, the happiness of being! Can you not startle the little thing out of its complacency, said I. Tell it what it really is, as you told me. Reveal to it the narrow limitations of Pointland, and lead it up to something higher. That is no easy task, said my master. Try you. Hereon, raising my voice to the uttermost, I addressed the point as follows. Silence, silence, contemptible creature. You call yourself the all in all, but you are the nothing. Your so-called universe is a mere speck in a line, and a line is a mere shadow as compared with— Hush, hush, you have said enough, interrupted the sphere. Now listen, and mark the effect of your harangue on the king of Pointland. The luster of the monarch, who beamed more brightly than ever upon hearing my words, showed clearly that he retained his complacency, and I had hardly ceased when he took up his strain again. Ah, the joy! Ah, the joy of thought! What can it not achieve by thinking? Its own thought coming to itself, suggestive of its disparagement, thereby to enhance its happiness. Sweet rebellion stirred up to result in triumph. Ah, the divine creative power of the all-in-one. Ah, the joy of being. You see, said my teacher, how little your words have done. So far as the monarch understands them at all, he accepts them as his own, for he cannot conceive of any other except himself, and plumes himself upon the variety of its thought as an instance of creative power. Let us leave this god of Pointland to the ignorant fruition of his omnipresence and omniscience. Nothing that you or I can do can rescue him from his self-satisfaction. After this, as we floated gently back to Flatland, I could hear the mild voice of my companion pointing the moral of my vision and stimulating me to aspire and to teach others to aspire. He had been angered at first, he confessed, by my ambition to soar to dimensions above the third, but since then he had received fresh insight, and he was not too proud to acknowledge his error to a pupil. Then he proceeded to initiate me into mysteries yet higher than those I had witnessed, showing me how to construct extra solids by the motion of solids, and double extra solids by the motion of extra solids, and all strictly according to analogy, all by methods so simple, so easy, as to be patent even to the female sex. Section 21. How I tried to teach the theory of 3 dimensions to my grandson, and with what success. I awoke rejoicing, and began to reflect on the glorious career before me. I would go forth, methought, at once, and evangelize the whole of Flatland. Even to women and soldiers should the gospel of 3 dimensions be proclaimed. I would begin with my wife. Just as I had decided on the plan of my operations, I heard the sound of many voices in the street commanding silence. Then followed a louder voice, it was a herald's proclamation. Listening attentively, I recognized the words of the resolution of the council enjoining the arrest, imprisonment, or execution of anyone who should pervert the minds of the people by delusions and by professing to have received revelations from another world. I reflected. This danger was not to be trifled with. It would be better to avoid it by omitting all mention of my revelation, and by proceeding on the path of demonstration, which after all seemed so simple and so conclusive that nothing would be lost by discarding the former means. Upward, not northward, was the clue to the whole proof. It had seemed to me fairly clear before I fell asleep, and when I first awoke, fresh from my dream, it had appeared as patent as arithmetic, but somehow it did not seem to me quite so obvious now. Though my wife entered the room opportunely just at that moment, I decided, after we had exchanged a few words of commonplace conversation, not to begin with her. My pentagonal sons were men of character and standing, and physicians of no mean reputation, but not great in mathematics, and in that respect unfit for my purpose. But it occurred to me that a young and docile hexagon with a mathematical turn would be a most suitable pupil. Why therefore not make my first experiment with my little precocious grandson, whose casual remarks on the meaning of 3 cubed had met with the approval of the sphere? Discussing the matter with him, a mere boy, I should be in perfect safety, for he would know nothing of the proclamation of the council, whereas I could not feel sure that my sons, so greatly did their patriotism and reverence for the circles predominate over mere blind affection, might not feel compelled to hand me over to the prefect if they found me seriously maintaining the seditious heresy of the 3rd dimension. But the first thing to be done was to satisfy in some way the curiosity of my wife, who naturally wished to know something of the reasons for which the circle had desired that mysterious interview, and of the means by which he had entered the house. Without entering into the details of the elaborate account I gave her, an account, I fear, not quite so consistent with truth as my readers in Spaceland might desire, I must be content with saying that I succeeded at last in persuading her to return quietly to her household duties without eliciting from me any reference to the world of 3 dimensions. This done, I immediately sent for my grandson, for to confess the truth, I felt that all that I had seen and heard was in some strange way slipping away from me, like the image of a half-grasped, tantalizing dream, and I longed to essay my skill in making a first disciple. When my grandson entered the room, I carefully secured the door. Then sitting down by his side and taking our mathematical tablets, or as you would call them, lines, I told him we would resume the lesson of yesterday. I taught him once more how a point by motion in 1 dimension produces a line, and how a straight line in 2 dimensions produces a square. After this, forcing a laugh, I said, "And now, you scamp, you wanted to make me believe that a square may in the same way, by motion upward, not northward, produce another figure, a sort of extra square in 3 dimensions. Say that again, you young rascal." At this moment we heard once more the herald's "Oh yes, outside in the street, proclaiming the resolution of the council. Young though he was, my grandson, who was unusually intelligent for his age, and bred up in perfect reverence for the authority of the circles, took in the situation with an acuteness for which I was quite unprepared. He remained silent till the last words of the proclamation had died away, and then, bursting into tears, "Dear Grandpapa," he said, "that was only my fun, and of course I meant nothing at all by it." And we did not know anything then about the new law, and I don't think I said anything about the third dimension, and I am sure I did not say one word about upward, not northward, for that would be such nonsense, you know. How could a thing move upward and not northward? Upward and not northward? Even if I were a baby, I could not be so absurd as that. How silly it is. Not at all silly, said I, losing my temper. Here, for example, I take this square. And at the word I grasped a movable square, which was lying at hand, and I move it, you see, not northward, but, yes, I move it upward. That is to say, not northward, but I move it somewhere. Not exactly like this, but somehow. Here I brought my sentence to an inane conclusion, shaking the square about in a purposeless manner, much to the amusement of my grandson, who burst out laughing louder than ever, and declared that I was not teaching him, but joking with him. And so saying, he unlocked the door and ran out of the room. Thus ended my first attempt to convert a pupil to the gospel of 3 dimensions. Section 22. How I then tried to diffuse the theory of 3 dimensions by other means, and of the result. My failure with my grandson did not encourage me to communicate my secret to others of my household, yet neither was I led by it to despair of success. Only I saw that I must not wholly rely on the catchphrase, upward, not northward, but must rather endeavor to seek a demonstration by setting before the public a clear view of the whole subject, and for this purpose it seemed necessary to resort to writing. So I devoted several months in privacy to the composition of a treatise on the mysteries of 3 dimensions, only with the view of evading the law, if possible. I spoke not of a physical dimension, but of a thought land, whence in theory a figure could look down upon Flatland and see simultaneously the insides of all things, and where it was possible that there might be supposed to exist a figure environed, as it were, with 6 squares, and containing 8 terminal points. But in writing this book, I found myself sadly hampered by the impossibility of drawing such diagrams as were necessary for my purpose. For of course in our country of Flatland there are no tablets but lines, and no diagrams but lines, all in one straight line, and only distinguishable by difference of size and brightness. So that when I had finished my treatise, which I entitled Through Flatland to Thoughtland, I could not feel certain that many would understand my meaning. Meanwhile, my life was under a cloud. All pleasures palled upon me. All sights tantalized and tempted me to outspoken treason, because I could not but compare what I saw in 2 dimensions with what it really was if seen in 3, and could hardly refrain from making my comparisons aloud, I neglected my clients and my own business to give myself to the contemplation of the mysteries which I had once beheld, yet which I could impart to no one, and found daily more difficult to reproduce even before my own mental vision. One day, about 11 months after my return from Spaceland, I tried to see a cube with my eye closed, but failed, and though I succeeded afterwards, I was not then quite certain, nor have I been ever afterwards, that I had exactly realized the original. This made me more melancholy than before, and determined me to take some step. Yet what, I knew not. I felt that I would have been willing to sacrifice my life for the cause, if thereby I could have produced conviction. But if I could not convince my grandson, how could I convince the highest and most developed circles in the land? And yet at times my spirit was too strong for me, and I gave vent to dangerous utterances. Already I was considered heterodox if not treasonable, and I was keenly alive to the danger of my position. Nevertheless, I could not at times refrain from bursting out into suspicious or half-seditious utterances, even among the highest polygonal and circular society. When, for example, the question arose about the treatment of those lunatics who said that they had received the power of seeing the insides of things, I would quote the saying of an ancient circle who declared that prophets and inspired people are always considered by the majority to be mad. And I could not help occasionally dropping such expressions as the eye that discerns the interiors of things and the all-seeing land. Once or twice, I even let fall the forbidden terms, the third and fourth dimensions. At last, to complete a series of minor indiscretions, at a meeting of our local speculative society, held at the palace of the prefect himself, some extremely silly person, having read an elaborate paper exhibiting the precise reasons why Providence has limited the number of dimensions to 2, and why the attribute of omnividence is assigned to the Supreme alone, I so far forgot myself as to give an exact account of the whole of my voyage with the sphere into space, and to the assembly hall in our metropolis, and then to space again, and of my return home, and of everything I had seen and heard in fact or vision. At first, indeed, I pretended that I was describing the imaginary experiences of a fictitious person, but my enthusiasm soon forced me to throw off all disguise, and finally, in a fervent peroration, I exhorted all my hearers to divest themselves of prejudice and to become believers in the third dimension. Need I say that I was at once arrested and taken before the council? Next morning, standing in the very place where but a very few months ago the sphere had stood in my company, I was allowed to begin and to continue my narration, unquestioned and uninterrupted. But from the first I foresaw my fate, for the president, noting that a guard of the better sort of policemen was in attendance, of angularity little if at all under 55 degrees, ordered them to be relieved before I began my defense by an inferior class of 2 or 3 degrees. I knew only too well what that meant. I was to be executed or imprisoned, and my story was to be kept secret from the world by the simultaneous destruction of the officials who had heard it. And this being the case, the president desired to substitute the cheaper for the more expensive victims. After I had concluded my defense, the president, perhaps perceiving that some of the junior circles had been moved by my evident earnestness, asked me 2 questions. 1. Whether I could indicate the direction which I meant when I used the words upward, not northward. And 2. Whether I could, by any diagrams or descriptions, other than the enumeration of imaginary sides and angles, indicate the figure I was pleased to call a cube. I declared that I could say nothing more, and that I must commit myself to the truth, whose cause would surely prevail in the end. The president replied that he quite concurred in my sentiment, and that I could not do better. I must be sentenced to perpetual imprisonment, but if the truth intended that I should emerge from prison and evangelize the world, the truth might be trusted to bring that result to pass. Meanwhile, I should be subjected to no discomfort that was not necessary to preclude escape, and unless I forfeited the privilege by misconduct, I should be occasionally permitted to see my brother, who had preceded me to my prison. 7 years have elapsed, and I am still a prisoner. And, if I accept the occasional visits of my brother, debarred from all companionship save that of my jailers. My brother is one of the best of squares, just, sensible, cheerful, and not without fraternal affection. Yet I confess that my weekly interviews, at least in one respect, cause me the bitterest pain. He was present when the sphere manifested himself in the council chamber. He saw the sphere's changing sections. He heard the explanation of the phenomena then given to the circles. Since that time, scarcely a week has passed during 7 whole years without his hearing from me a repetition of the part I played in that manifestation, together with ample descriptions of all the phenomena in Spaceland, and the arguments for the existence of solid things derivable from analogy. Yet, I take shame to be forced to confess it. My brother has not yet grasped the nature of the 3rd dimension, and frankly avows his disbelief in the existence of a sphere. Hence I am absolutely destitute of converts, and for aught that I can see, the millennial revelation has been made to me for nothing. Prometheus up in Spaceland was bound for bringing down fire for mortals, but I, poor Flatland Prometheus, lie here in prison for bringing down nothing to my countrymen. Yet I exist in the hope that these memoirs in some manner, I know not how, may find their way to the minds of humanity in some dimension, and may stir up a race of rebels who shall refuse to be confined to limited dimensionality. That is the hope of my brighter moments. Alas, it is not always so. Heavily weighs on me at times the burdensome reflection that I cannot honestly say I am confident as to the exact shape of the once seen, oft regretted cube, and in my nightly visions the mysterious precept, upward, not northward, haunts me like a soul-devouring sphinx. It is part of the martyrdom which I endure for the cause of the truth, that there are seasons of mental weakness, when cubes and spheres flit away into the background of scarce possible existences, when the land of 3 dimensions seems almost as visionary as the land of 1 or none. Nay, when even this hard wall that bars me from my freedom, these very tablets on which I am writing, and all the substantial realities of Flatland itself appear no better than the offspring of a diseased imagination or the baseless fabric of a dream. And with that, we have reached the end of Flatland, a romance of many dimensions, by A. Square, or as we know him, Edwin A. Abbott. What a fascinating intellectual exercise that book is, in many, many dimensions, and I hope you enjoyed it. For those that support us on Patreon, I'll be putting together all the parts of this book into a single long recording, so keep an eye out for that. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.